Okay, good morning, everyone. And firstly, thank you for taking time off on a Sunday to join us. And I would definitely like to thank Hum Fauji Initiatives and especially Karul Govila for giving us an opportunity to be presenting to you. Uh, as is shown in the slide, I was given a very interesting and yet challenging topic. The topic says safe investment in today's times. For the past 26 years in the industry, I'm yet to actually find out what is a safe investment in any particular time. So I'll take it a pot shot, and hopefully at the end of the session, we'll be able to give you some solution. Now, I know some of you might be wondering what it means when it says Gaurav Parija. That's obviously my name, but it says passed and failed. Now, the reason I put it pass and fail is I'm actually very honored and happy to be presenting to an audience which I would presume is 100% from the armed forces. Now, like every other kid, I also wanted to be in the armed forces and did take a pot shot at joining the NDA. So in the year 1989, I was fortunate enough to actually clear the written exam. I was asked to go to Mysore for the physicals and all of the other things because I wanted to join the Air Force. Now, surprisingly, I also did clear the written examination to qualify to be a pilot. I took the drum test and the other test, and I was told I cleared, but sadly, fortune turned out that I couldn't pass the other Viva and the physicals and the medicals, and sadly enough, I was not able to join the Air Force. Thankfully, I managed to join the second important career which you can have in the Indian markets today, which is in the mutual fund business, and I'm very, very happy to have spent the last 26 years. So with that, let me jump into today's agenda, and this is what I will try to cover. So the first part is, I think I was told that you have to talk about, given all the environment, given all the challenges investors are facing, tell us about some safe options. So I just want to first clarify and define what does safe mean. Safe means very different things for very different people in different conditions. Then we will move on to, in our opinion, what is the investing pyramid. Very quickly understand some asset classes, while many of you might have already know what are the different asset classes. But in the context of what I speak, I would like to build on that. Lastly, for a section of investors who might have retired or planning to go into retirement, what is the solution for the current times? And round it off by reaffirming the faith that mutual fund actually sahi hai. And I'll just show you some clippings of my journey. So what are we trying to solve for today? I think that's the question we need to ask. So are we wanting to find a safe investment option, or we are actually trying to find a safe way to invest? And why I ask this is, many a time when an investor or a relative or a partner comes to me, I think the answer is wanting to find is the question to this, but his question is framed like this, saying, Gaurav, abhi ke din mein kya safe hai? And then we all know that safe, and as I'll show you, there are very different answers for what your eventual goal is. So I think first, please, and all the participants in this presentation, ask, what are you trying to solve? Are you trying to get the safest investment? Then we all know the safest investment is your bank deposit. Or are we trying to find a solution to create wealth over the long run and yet appear to be safe? I think those are two very fundamentally distinct questions you need to answer. So what is safe, which is the reverse of risky, like I put? So is eating salt safe? Someone can question, is climbing the Everest safe? Is playing hockey safe? Is taking a flight safe? And enough and more statistics has proven that taking a flight is actually safer than driving a car, or is even walking down your road safe? Now, each one, depending on the conditions, the situations, will answer differently. Now, someone who is obviously having high blood pressure, for him eating salt is like poison. But for most others, the doctors actually prescribe you to take salt. Now, is climbing Everest safe? You ask all those people who climbed Everest, they'll say it's absolutely safe. It's tough, it's challenging, but yeah, it gives you the kick in life, and so on and so forth. And similar is the fact that if you were to look at the activities being done by each of the individuals, I don't think any one of us in this room, even if people are from the armed forces, many of us would venture to do this because it all looks very unsafe. But yeah, but look at the reactions of each of the individuals, they're all smiling, which effectively means for these individuals, this is safe. Exactly in the same manner, like in life, safe in investing is also highly misunderstood. So the normal belief and understanding is that fixed deposits and bonds are safe. Absolutely right, they are safe. But I think all of us remember that when it comes to investing, there are actually three pillars or three circles of investing. One is, what is the safety of the instrument? What is the liquidity of the instrument? And third, what is the return I get from the instrument? And for every particular need or goal you have, each one of those things will take a certain higher weightage, and accordingly, you have to plan for your investments. The second aspect and belief is gold is safe. Yes, gold is safe from a asset holding perspective. Having a house and asset is safe. And 9 out of 10, if not 99 out of 100 people, and it's been changing rapidly over the years, would have considered that equity and equity-related instruments are a little risky. Having said that, let's put some perspectives in mind now. So, if you were to look at some of the scenarios for a 30-year-old Jawan or a young officer who is likely to live for another 70 years. Now, you will be surprised as to why I'm saying an Indian average person will live for 100 years. Do remember that the mortality rate of India was 36 during independence, has hit 70 as we speak, and given all the advances in medical science, is likely to touch 100 over the next 10-20 years. And more so, this is for an average Indian. And given that most of you are from the armed forces who are far fitter than most of us, your average age of survival is not going to be 60, 70, 80. It is going to be 90, 100, 110. So for a person who is in 30s and has got another 70 years to survive, is just having all the money in so-called safe FDs actually safe? Now, for a retired person who has just finished his career in the armed forces or any other working career, he or she retires between, depending on where you work, at the age of 58 or 60. Now, earlier, the standard rule was most retirees had a pension. Now, the rate of interest was fairly high, and hence 9 out of 10 would just go and put all the money in a traditional fixed income and say, okay, I'm anyway going to live for 10, 15 years. Kya farak padta hai? Let me just go and buy an FD which gives me cash flows. That dramatically changed. That dramatically changed is because all of us should realize that if you retire at 60, you also have another 30, 40 years to live, which is like 2/3 of your life is now going to be dependent on your final pool of assets. So while you might consider investing in safe assets, if those assets don't beat inflation, at some stage, you're likely to run out of money. And that's the biggest dilemma which a lot of investors have. Now, lastly, you might have a house, you might have 3 houses, but all of us know that if there is an emergency, can you actually sell part of a house or the entire house quickly? So what I just wanted to point out is that while we believe things are safe, the circumstances clearly dictate that you will have to take different measures or different actions to invest while you are bordering or harping on the concept of safety. So what really matters in creating wealth and yet be safe? And the next slide actually talks about a survey which was done on 500 wealthy families. Now, the caveat here is that these wealthy families created wealth by working and not either by being a businessman or like a listing happened like in Zomato and suddenly the founder became rich. These were people like you and me who saved over the period of their working careers and suddenly at the end of the working careers found that they were sitting on a lot of wealth. And this was an actual survey done in the US. So what the survey found was the secret of creating wealth was actually 3 things. The first and foremost, I think this must have been talked to you by Colonel Govila and his team thousands of times. The mantra of creating wealth starts and ends actually with asset allocation. The second is how strong or how able are you to manage one's emotions when financial conditions are tough. And lastly, how many of us remember a very simple formula we learned in school, which said future value is equal to present value into 1 plus r raised to the power n. This is it. If you can master these 3 things, trust you me, over long periods of time or for every goal, I think your ability to create wealth will be far better than if you are to just look at timing the market. And this is the basis of an actual survey done in the US. Now, what does this mean in an analogy or in a different example? And this is an example I thought apt for this audience. And all of you who have been in the armed forces have been trained on multiple firing weapons and pistols and rifles. Clearly, if you want to take a sniper shot, you'd go with a 7.6 millimeter. If you want to take a close shot, I think people would prefer a Glock. Why is that? Because for every target, you've been trained to choose a different weapon. And hence, in investing and in creating wealth, do not make the mistake that for every goal, the choice of the investment has to be the same, irrespective of whether you think it's a risky investment or a safe investment. And that's all about what is asset allocation. So if you're to understand this, and we try to put a simple structure in the shape of a pyramid, there are 3 steps or 3 ladders of an investing pyramid. The first ladder is what we call sacred assets. Sacred assets could be defined as assets which are FDs, high quality AAA oriented mutual funds, government bonds like RBI, PPF, EPF, small savings. And why are they called sacred assets? Because A, these assets are meant for capital preservation, and these assets are very low to zero risk of capital erosion. But given this characteristics, if they are the highest forms of safety, we'll all appreciate that they will be potentially giving you the lowest potential return, because you have to compensate returns for getting the highest amount of safety. The second bucket of assets is what we define as serious assets. Serious assets, like is shown, is one ladder ahead of the sacred. So they could be assets like gold. Now, why have we put gold in the serious and not sacred? Because do remember, gold prices fluctuate. So the experience of someone investing in gold varies from the time you enter in and buy the asset class, and some mix of hybrid funds and all of that. Now, these assets, like I've shown, compromise safety to some extent, yet add one more sleeve or layer of return, and have a marginal risk of capital erosion. And the last but not the least are assets called aggressive assets. Now, I have not used the word risky assets because that's a wrong connotation. Aggressive assets are typically, and many of you would know, are assets which are equity or equity related, high chances of capital erosion, yet high chances of strong return over the long run, and prices keep fluctuating. But as history tells us, if you hold these assets for longer period of time, the potential to create wealth and beat inflation is significantly higher. Now, this is a pyramid we all know, but where the classic problem happens is we find that investors, irrespective of age and goal, try to mimic the percentages in the same manner. And we, like I showed you in the previous slide, that for every different target, there's a different weapon you need to choose. We believe that the components of the pyramid should be different depending on the age profile or the context of the investor. And I've tried to broadly look at 3 types of investors. Obviously, there are thousands and thousands of one, and each of you are of a different goal, different need, different risk profile. But if you wanted to broadly fit investors into 3 buckets, there would be one investor or a young officer or a Jawan who is just starting off, got married, 30, 35, small kid. Now, clearly for him, his journey is 60, 70 years down the line. So what are some of his critical needs? One is obviously meeting his day-to-day expense, which I presume would be met largely by salary plus 10, 15% in what we call sacred assets. He has dreams for his kids, which are 10, 15, 20 years down the line, depending on the age of the kid. And last but not the least, he also has to plan for retirement. Now, the problem we find in India is that if you were to talk to someone in the lower age group and say, कि वो आपके retirement के लिए आपको निवेश करना है, he is immediately put off. He is saying, अभी तो शुरू कर रहा हूँ business काम. Why are you talking about retirement? And that's one of the fundamental mistakes people make. Now, this is irrespective of whether people have a pension, have a PF from their working careers. Do realize, and I will point it out later, that there is a structural change which is happening in India, like in most other countries. So for this sort of an investor, we suggested, again, this is very, very elementary or basic structure which we are suggesting. Do sit down with the team in Hampoji to understand exactly what is the right pyramid for you, we would suggest 20% in sacred, 20% serious, and 60% in aggressive assets. There is then a middle-aged family. Unfortunately, I couldn't get actually a picture of a middle-aged army officer or a lady. The suggested investment pattern should be 40, 30, 30. And if you have to move finally to a retired couple, now what are some of the goals for the retired couple? Firstly, obviously running the house, given that the salary has stopped. Many retired couple today wants to get into some hobby or some passion which they have been wanting to do for their careers, working careers, but just not able to do because of time. And lastly, I think one of the biggest challenges which faces Indians, and especially Indians who are retiring now, is the fact that they have to plan to live for a very, very long life without a steady cash flow coming in the form of a salary. Now that clearly has changed over the last 30, 40 years, as I just alluded in my earlier part of my presentation. And hence for this segment also, we think 20 to 40% of your assets should be in serious / aggressive assets, and the balance or the core can be a combination of the pension you receive, the cash flows you receive from your other fixed instruments, and 60% in sacred. Now, like I said, this is a very elementary way, and this actually is trying to tell you that safety has very different connotations for different people in this audience. And don't mix safety of creating wealth with the safety of the underlying instruments. Now, given this, what are the two main asset classes and how are they fundamentally different? So the two main asset classes are equity and fixed income. I'm sure all of you would be fairly familiar. And why are all of us suggesting that you should have a mix of both? The reason is pretty much summed up in the fact that equity is an asset class which is pro-cyclical. What is the meaning of pro-cyclical? So equity as an asset class always tends to do well when the underlying economy does well. When things are going good, GDP is going at a fast clip, everyone is starting to create wealth, equity as an asset class starts doing well. But all of us know that economics, market cycles don't move in a linear line. There are times where economy is in a downswing, COVID happens, drought happens, and multiple things happen. Trade war happens in the world. There is a global financial crisis. So economic cycles moves up and down. And hence, not only do you need to invest in an asset class which is pro-cyclical and is growth oriented, you need to balance it. And again, like I showed you in my previous slide, the amount of balancing needs to be done basis your age and your risk profile in an asset which is counter-cyclical. So do remember the key of asset allocation is to buy assets which are counter-cyclical to each other, which effectively means if one asset class is doing well in a particular environment, the other classes is not doing so well in the other environment, in the same environment, and vice versa. So these are the two broad asset classes which you need to look at and investing as per the investment pyramid. Now, moving on to the last part, the big dilemma which everyone faces today is that interest rates were close to 10% in October 08, hovering around 5%, and we really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. On the other hand, taxes continue to be now more and more integral part of your life. I don't think there is any aspect of a working person or a retired person above a certain threshold to avoid or not be subject to tax. Expenses continue to be seeming to rise because of higher inflation. So what does an investor or a person do today? Now, before we get into some solution, especially targeted at the last bucket, which is the segment which is about to retire or having retired, do understand some fundamental shifts or changes which is happening in India and the world. First and foremost, do remember that the world and India will continue to see lower interest rates for long. Now, when I started my career in 1995, you could actually buy a high quality FD and get 16 to 17% of interest rate. Now, you heard me right, 16 to 17% of interest rate. And these were instruments offered by ICICI, ITC, and all the biggies. Today, they offer you rates of 4.5%, 5%. The second thing, and I keep repeating this multiple times through my presentation, and this is one thing which many Indians are not yet realizing and understanding the damage it could do, that Indians will live longer, easily up to 90 years and more. And most of people in this audience which have access to world-class health facilities do appreciate the fact that while you might have a niggle here, there, you might have some disease, you will live. And to live, you need cash, and you need cash flows. Lastly, as a structural change, do realize that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, the day may not be far where India will move from what is called a defined contribution. So, for example, my father who retired from State Bank has a pension. But the year I joined a PSU firm, which was Unit Trust of India, I had no pension. I was automatically moved to PF. And many of you would know that anyone joining the government has a pension, but that pension is not guaranteed. You have to contribute. The pension is run by a third-party independent manager, and basis the returns, you are likely to get some money, which is the NPS. So India is moving from a defined benefit to defined contribution, and that's the global way, because clearly most countries realize that the government is here to run the country, not to be doing fiscal deficit. So given all this, you have two choices. Either you choose a riskier asset. So many a time people come and tell us, you know what, Gaurav, interest bank ka deposit 5% hai. Can you give me something which gives me 9%, but yet be safe? And I only look at him and wonder and say, if that was the case, why would I not buy 9% and only tell you? The answer is there is no free lunch. So if you think you can get 9% of interest in a different bond, there is a reason why State Bank of India is giving you 3% and this instrument is giving you 9%. So be very careful when you are trying to invest in something basis the return you expected or outcome expected and forgetting your risk profile. The second choice people have is that can you go back to the pyramid and really assess that the assets which are called aggressive, are they actually aggressive or unsafe? And what I've tried to do is try to give a solution, and I would apologize at the outset that this solution is clearly aimed at people in the last bucket, the people who are planning to retire or just retired, and try to give them a way out of this lower interest rates in what we think is a very, very interesting concept which is offered by mutual funds. So how do you go about investing in equity and yet get cash flows over a period of time? And that's where, and if you've not heard of this term, do understand and adopt a concept called SWP, which is Systematic Withdrawal Plan. What is Systematic Withdrawal Plan? It is actually the reverse of a systematic investment plan. Now, in a systematic investment plan, many of you would be aware of the term. You invest a certain amount of money every month and hopefully create a large amount of pool of assets over the long run. Systematic withdrawal is the reverse. When you stop working and when your salary stops, you are now wanting cash flows to come to you. Go to the mutual fund or go to an entity and say, now start a SWP. The systematic withdrawal plan actually allows you to withdraw a defined amount from your savings at certain frequencies. Now, what are some of the benefits and flexibilities of a withdrawal plan? Firstly, SWP can be opted in any mutual fund, typically the so-called aggressive asset-based mutual funds, which is your hybrid, conservative hybrid, aggressive hybrid, balanced advantage funds and the likes. And what is more fascinating is the wide range of options. So if you choose a SWP, you could actually choose to get a fixed amount of money every month, quarter or annually. For investors who are very sure that, look, if I put 100 rupees, I don't want my 100 rupees to go down by even a paisa. The mutual funds actually give you an option of taking out only the capital appreciation, which effectively means you put 100, at the end of the month, the value goes to 101. The mutual fund will take out the 1 rupee and give it to you. The mutual funds also allow you the flexibility to increase this amount every year by a certain percentage or by a certain amount. Why is that required? Because as you know, inflation keeps going up over a period of time. And if your cash flows have to meet inflation, what you spend for today for 50,000, the amount would cost you 52,000, let's say next year basis inflation. So that option is also built in. You can start and stop as per your wish. And unlike traditional investment routes, there are no minimum, there are no maximum. It is all flexible. And that is what I think is a solution all of us need to consider from a safety perspective in today's times of overcoming lower interest rates. Has it worked, or am I just trying to give you a marketing technique or gimmick? So what I did was actually picked up an investor who had put 50 lakhs of rupees in the equity markets by buying an index fund way back in 2006. This is 15 years back. This investor said, okay, I'm going to put 50 lakhs. I need to withdraw at the rate of 7% only, because that's what you are typically happy with. If you get 7% per annum, that's a reasonable rate of return in terms of cash flows. How has the investor fared over the last 15 years? Now, why is 15 years important? 15 years is important because the number of events which has happened over the 15 years has had dramatic impacts to markets. So he started in 2006, 2008, one of the biggest global financial crisis happened. The markets fell 90%, 60%. So if you had invested 100, his value became 40. And then it started going up. 2011 was the European debt crisis. There was some impact to the markets. 2013, we all know there was something called taper tantrum, where US started cutting back liquidity. 2016, there was this China-US trade war. 2018-19 onwards, global deflation, global slowdown. 2020, COVID. So you had major economic events which has happened over the last 15 years. So if I had to just give that perspective, you would say, oh, someone who had put money in 2006 would not have created wealth and had enough money now after taking out so much of money. So you are looking at an investor who's been taking out 3,60,000 every year from his investment of 50. And what the final outcome is will actually surprise, if not shock many of you. This is how it actually looks at. So investor has put 50 lakhs on 2nd January. He started withdrawing from 1st February 2006 at the rate of 30,000. A total of 187 months where he's got 30,000 and hence 56 lakhs. After doing all of that, he's still left with 1.7 crores with an effective interest rate of 13. Now flashback and ask yourself, was the investment in 2006 a safe investment or a risky investment? And that's why I wanted to start my session by telling that what is safe firstly needs to be understood and defined very clearly. Otherwise, we'll end up taking a very wrong route. While it appears safe, it is actually unsafe. And a very interesting survey has actually, statistics has been released by RBI, which says that the banks put together have got unclaimed amounts in excess of 18,500 crores. Now, where is this unclaimed amount from? It is clearly from people who have expired and their survivors didn't know, they didn't have a will, they didn't have a succession plan. And the fact is that many a time when a person retires, there is a tendency to tighten and think that, oh, I'm not going to get enough cash flows. Let me put all my money in so-called safe investments and lose out on the potential of investing in an asset class which beats inflation. So please understand what is safe and what is safe way to invest. Having said that, we always also tell investors that never be a daredevil in financial matters. And the reason we say this is we typically find investor behavior oscillating between either being too fearful or too greedy. For example, in March 2020, if I had come and presented to you and told invest in equity markets, many of you would have put off your video and said, oh, this guy is talking through the roof. Today, if I come and tell you, you know what, equity markets look a little high, don't put all your money, you'll say, no, this guy doesn't know. Markets will give another 30%. Look what happened to Zomato. People said it was overvalued, but it is opened with a 60%. So clearly, you have to manage your emotions between fear and greed. So don't be a daredevil. How do you avoid being a daredevil in financial matters? This is where Colonel Govila and his team come to the rescue. Even like this is clearly, I think all of us can relate to this picture. Champions need guidance. Arjuna was clearly one of the best warriors and soldiers and whatever you can talk about his nature. Yet when the time came to fight, he was backing off, and that's where he needed someone to guide him to his rightful path. Similarly, when it comes to investing, many of us clearly are not plugged into what is investing, the route to investing, the financial planning, and that's why you need guidance. And I, for one, even being after spending 26 years in the business, still look at a so-called financial champion to guide me through this whole process of investing. So rounding off, and this is my last slide, and Colonel Govil at the beginning wanted me to do an introduction, so I will do my introduction at the end. My name is Gaurav Parija, and I think many of you, when it is comes to investing in the mutual funds, would have been told that time in the market is actually better than timing the market. And actually, and if you were to look at how my life has progressed, it's been true, because when I joined the industry was only 90,000 crores. And this was way back in 1995, after my postgraduate from MBA. If someone then would have told me that after 26 years, the industry would be 34 lakh crores, I don't think he or I would have believed it, but it's actually proven right that an industry which does not give a single rupee of guarantee has managed to get 34 lakh crores of investments in, shows that we are doing something right, and this is a great place to be from most aspects if you were to look at from investing. So for me, time in the market has actually helped. I know many of you would say I've obviously got older and aged, but I personally think I've benefited a lot by being in this industry. This industry clearly is going to go leaps and bounds, and we would definitely want all of you to be participating in this journey. With this, I will pause and end my presentation, thanking the entire team at Comt4G again for giving us an opportunity to talk about this topic. And thanks to all of you for patiently listening through the last 20-25 minutes of what we wanted to tell you about safe investing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Gaurav. I really liked especially some of your visuals. Mithunda wala visual included. so it was pretty good. Can we remove the share, please? Yeah. So it was very good, and I'm very sure the simple way in which you put across things, especially with your visuals, were very good. Now, we've received a lot of questions on this. One very important question is, how safe are the debt funds? When we talk about debt, fixed income, we are talking about safety. Almost all the investors, they have some sort of misgivings about the debt funds now after the Franklin case, which happened on 23rd April last year. What do you think are the mechanisms that the mutual fund industry in particular is following now, and what is the take of the market regulator SEBI on this?
Okay, I think it's a very apt question and very relevant in today's time. Sadly, as a mutual fund, as IDFC AMC, we've actually not had to change anything, because we, for one, always believe that to invest in debt, and like I showed you, there is no point moving from your current risk profile to a different. So firstly, understand, when we choose a debt instrument, why do people buy into an FD? Let's say an HDFC FD or a State Bank deposit. They buy into it predominantly for 3-4 reasons. Firstly, it gives obviously a guaranteed return. I will keep that aside because mutual funds can't give. Firstly, they buy because they know their investments are supposed to be in very safe, high quality instruments, which clearly have very low to zero chance of capital erosion. They invest in FD because the durations are limited, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. And given this, one of the fundamental aspects of investing in fixed income is, if you are moving out of that instrument into a mutual fund, the investor has to realize to tick box these two aspects, that A, am I going and buying a like for a like? So if I was buying a HDFC deposit, is my debt mutual fund also holding papers which are like the HDFCs of the world or the SBIs of the world or the government securities? Now, what happened was that, and this is the concept of greed, people said, oh, you know what, my SBI was giving 5. Here came this instrument which apparently was giving me 8 with the promise of safety. And that clearly was something which we all realized very sadly was not the case. So when it comes to fixed income investing, we believe that most of your fixed investments should be in, and we split the fixed investment into a framework called liquidity bucket, core bucket, and satellite bucket. The core bucket is the actual replica of an FD, and that's where you should be investing, because that bucket should have the highest quality of papers with very low duration or tenure. It's not that I buy a 30-year paper. And that's something you should appreciate. From a SEBI perspective, multiple changes. I think the riskometer has been changed. Now you've got a 3x3 matrix of classifying funds into various risk classifications. Having said that, for an investor, I don't think you should get too bogged down and look at all these parameters, because how much ever you try, even if we struggle to understand this, for an investor, it's clearly out of the question. Just understand one thing. Like your FD gives you high exposure to high quality instruments, your underlying fixed income should give you that. Now, if you're expecting that by being bored with a 5% SBI FD, I can get a 9% higher return generating fixed income instrument, there is no such free lunch. It's like saying I'm a diabetic, I'm bored by eating less sugar, let me go and try a candy. It doesn't work.
Yeah, okay. Point very well understood, Mr. Gaurav. And thankful to you for bringing out these things so very clearly and dispassionately, and with all the disclaimers included. So, Mr. Gaurav, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grateful to you. And the comments that we are receiving from people on various forums, on various places are indicative of the fact that your talk, your session has been very well received. I'm really grateful to you for this. Thank you very much.
And thank you once again for inviting us. Have a good day. Stay safe, all of you, and do get vaccinated.
Thank you.